Hello, so today's lesson is 2.8 decimal multiplication. We're going to learn how to multiply decimals and also estimate the answer when multiplying some decimal numbers. This lesson has some key words. We've seen these key words before. They don't change when it comes to decimal numbers. The multiplicand is our first number. The multiplier is our second number. Those words are good to know, but not as important as the word product. The word product is the result or answer of a multiplication problem. So 28 is the product of 7 and 4. So we're going to be solving for products today. In the Think About section, it's all about Sophie and how she has 37 quarters that she needs to count and know the total value of. Writing a quarter plus a quarter plus a quarter 37 times is pretty darn time consuming. And so she knows this and decides instead she's going to multiply. But now she's multiplying a decimal. How should she go about it? The method I'm going to show today is a little bit different than the book, and I find it a simpler method. What she's going to do is take the two numbers that she has and take a look at the decimal places that she has. 37 is a whole number, so it doesn't have any decimal places. Sure, we could write it as 37.00, but we don't have to. But for the quarter, we do. We need to write it as 0.25. And 0.25 has two decimal places in it. So what we can do is say, all right, this number has two decimal places. So let me hold that as my answer. In my answer, I'm going to have two decimal places. And then what I can do is actually rewrite and completely ignore the decimal. Just pretend like it's not there. So I can take 37 and multiply, instead of by 0.25, I can multiply by 25. So I can change it into basically like a whole number, keeping in mind that I know that final answer will have two decimal places. So let's go ahead and multiply. 5 times 7 is 35. Carry my 3. 5 times 3 is 15, plus 3 is 18. My first row is done. My second row, I need to put that all-important 0 to hold the place and move over to your 2. 2 times 7 is 14, so I'll carry my 1 up. And 2 times 3 is 6, plus 1 is 7. So I'm going to add them. 5 plus 0 is 5. 8 plus 4 is 12. Carry my 1. And 2 plus 7 is 9. So it looks like my answer is 925, but I know that my decimal places need to be reflected in the answer, and I need two decimal places. So from the right, always the right, I go 1, 2 decimal places, and pop my decimal there. And so she has $9.25. So these are the steps that I'd like to show today for multiplying decimal numbers. We're not going to try to line up decimals. We have to line up decimals when we add and subtract decimal numbers, but never when we multiply decimals. Instead, what we can do is count the number of decimal places for both our multiplicand and our multiplier, the two numbers that we're multiplying with each other. If you have, for example, two decimal places in your first number and two decimal places in your second number, you're going to add those two together for a total of 4 decimal places in your answer. I rewrite the numbers without decimals so that I can multiply them with ease. I multiply them, get an answer, and then I take the number of decimal places I determined earlier and move the decimal in my final answer. So we're going to practice this strategy now. Later we'll be estimating some answers, but for ones like the first do together questions and the first exercise questions, the numbers are pretty small, so an estimate won't give us an accurate reflection of what our answer is going to be. So we have 0.7 times 0.4 here. So I see that I have one decimal place in my first number, and I have 1 decimal place in my second number. And so I'm going to add those together. So I will have 2 decimal places in my answer. From there, I can completely ignore the decimals. I don't have to line them up. I don't have to include them. I can get rid of that 0. I'm going to now look at the numbers as though they're just numbers. 7 times 4. 7 times 4 is 28. And because I determined that my answer will have 2 decimal places, I'm going to go from the right, 1, 2 decimal places, put my decimal in, and then it's a good practice to put a 0 in front to hold the whole number space. So 0.7 times 0.4 gives a product of 0.28. For number 2, we count our decimal places first. 1.21 has 2 decimal places, and 0.043 has 3 decimal places. I add them together, giving me a total of 5 decimal places that I will use when I determine my answer. Now I can ignore all the decimals and those zeros in front of the decimal. I'm going to write this like 121 times 43. This is much easier to deal with, so I can go ahead and multiply with confidence. 3 times 1 is 3, 3 times 2 is 6, 3 times 1 is 3. In my second row, I'm going to place a 0. 4 times 1 is 4, 4 times 2 is 8, and 4 times 1 is 4. I will add my rows together. 3 plus 0 is 3, 6 plus 4 is 10, carry my 1. 4 plus 8 is 12, I'll carry again, and 1 plus 4 is 5. So this 5,203 is going to change now because I need to add my decimal places in. We determined that the answer should have 5 decimal places. So from the right, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If you have extra, you're going to pop zeros in. So the decimal goes there. I'll put a 0 in the tenths place and a 0 in the ones place to hold the whole number. So 1.21 times 0.043 results in 0.05203. I will work through the first exercise questions so you can try them, pause the video, and then check the solution if you like. Number 1, 2, 3, and 4, we're not going to do any estimating. We're going to simply count decimals, multiply, and determine our answer. So number 1, we have 1 decimal place for our first multiplicand and 1 decimal place for our multiplier. So we'll have a total of 2 decimal places, and I'll just write DP for decimal places. That's going to be what's in our answer. Now I can ignore the decimals and look at it as 5 times 3, which is 15. But I determined that I need to add in 2 decimal places from the right. So 1, 2. So my decimal goes in front of the 1. And I'm going to put a 0. So my answer here is 0.15. 15 hundredths. For number 2, I have 1, 2 decimal places plus 1 decimal place. My answer will have 3 decimal places in it, and I simply multiply 7 times 2, which is 14. I have 3 decimal places, so I'm going to be adding zeros. 1, 2, 3. So my decimal goes there. I'll put a 0 in the tenths place, and I can put a 0 in front to hold the ones place. So 0.014 is my answer. For number 3, I have 1, 2, 3 decimal places and 1, 2 decimal places. So I'll add them up. So my answer will have 5 decimal places in it. 8 times 6 is 48, and I'm going to write it out here because I know I'm going to be adding some zeros. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Put my decimal place there. Put a 0 for the whole number and fill in. So I'm going to have 3 zeros in front there. 0.00048. Number 4, 2 decimal places, and 1, 2, 3 decimal places. My answer will have 5 decimal places in it. 9 times 5 is 45, and we're going to be doing very similarly to number 3. We're going to be moving from the right 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 decimal places. 0 to hold the ones place. 1, 2, 3 zeros. And I just write it again so it looks a bit nicer, but I don't mind doing those bubbles. Kind of that jumping really keeps me organized. 0.00045. When we get into some bigger numbers where we have numbers on the whole number side, we can start to estimate. That just gives us a sense of where we should be at. That way, if we do make a mistake with the decimals, we can catch our mistake. So if we look at 4.5 rounded, that's going to round up to 5. And if we look at 21 rounded, and remember estimating means front end rounding, that's going to be like 20. So 5 times 20 is 100. So my estimate is 100. We're going to go ahead and do the actual. We see that we have 1 decimal place. So 1 decimal place in our answer, and I'm going to rewrite without any decimals at all. I'm going to take 45 times 21 and go ahead and multiply. 1 times 5 is 5. 1 times 4 is 4. For my second row, I'm going to put in the 0. 2 times 5 is 10. Carry my 1. 2 times 4 is 8, plus 1 is 9. I add my rows together, giving me 945. But remember that we determined we have 1 decimal place. So from the back, we're going to move 1 decimal place. So my answer here is going to be 94.5, which is close to my estimate of 100. Let's take a look at number 6. We have 36.5. Remember, we're front end rounding, so you're going to have to resist the temptation to make this 37. We're going to round this up to 40. And 0.24 is actually going to round down completely to 0. So what we can do here is we can cheat a little bit, and we can multiply by 0.2. We can see what we want to do here. So what we'll do here is we'll round to this place here. So we'll end up with a 0.2. So we're going to use our knowledge of counting our spaces. So we're going to end up with 1 decimal place in our answer. And it's like 40 times 2, which is 80. But with 1 decimal place in our answer, we're going to move back. So it'll be like 8.0 or 8. So that will be our estimated. If we take our actual, we look and see that I have 1 decimal place here and 2 decimal places in my multiplier. So my answer will have 3 decimal places. 365 times 24. We multiply, we get 20. 24, 26, 12 and 2 is 14, and in my second row, put my 0, 2 times 5 is 10, 6 times 2 is 12 and 1 is 13, and 2 times 3 is 6 and 1 is 7. I add them up, and because I have 3 decimal places in my answer, I move 1, 2, 3 decimal places. 8.76 is my answer. I hope you found this video helpful and you can try the rest.